But we start this hour with this story. Parliament has been receiving a briefing on the fire that engulfed the legislature. Parliament says the extent of the structural damage is hampering police forensic investigations, but it's focusing on continuing the work of Parliament and finding alternative space for political parties and staff to be accommodated. Let me take you to eNCA's Lindsay Dentlinger, who joins me now for an update. So a briefing on the situation, Lindsay, for members of Parliament. How much has come out, given the fact that, the investigation is still underway, and usually people at the forefront of investigations don't want to be too forthcoming while they're investigating. But how much have they told MPs?
Yes, Tulas, as you rightly point out, very little that we're getting this afternoon, or so far. That meeting's still ongoing. But the acting secretary to Parliament, I think we were probably expecting a little bit more from her today, but she is not venturing into that ambit of the security breach per se, saying that is the purview of the Hawks, who are currently investigating. But what she has conceded today, Tulas, is what we were hearing from Nahawu, the unions, since the day this fire broke out. She has confirmed that Parliament's protection officers were not on duty on the night and the morning of the fire. And this, she has conceded, was as a result of so-called COVID-19 rosters. As we know, workplaces all over the country have made allowances during this pandemic. And in the case of Parliament, it has meant that parliamentary protection officers not on the premises on that night because they were not required to be there, although she points out that there is a standby roster and that they could have been called in, but no parliamentary protection officers, which means that all eyes are now on the SAPS, as they would have been the only people on the premises keeping watch, keeping guard on the night and the day in question. And as you know, we are yet to hear anything from the police minister regarding the role the SAPS might have played in allowing this breach. So very little that we're getting from the Secretary to Parliament. And we also had a very presentation also from the Public Works Department about what it, in answering some of the questions that have been coming up as related to this fire incident, most notably the fact that government buildings are not insured. And so the state takes all the risk for the kind of damage that we've seen, and also speaking to some of the findings to us of the firefighters from the city of Cape Town, who were the first responders on the scene, and what they found in terms of the safety and security equipment in the buildings that were affected by the fire.
Yeah, in fact, talk to me a bit more about that. My understanding is that members of the opposition, particularly the DA, are not impressed with Minister Patricia de Lille, particularly around the audit report and the findings after the fire that actually happened at some point last year.
So, Tulas, yes, we cannot divorce the politicking that is involved when it comes to the DA and Minister Patricia de Lille, not to say that we absolve the minister from any accountability that she should be taking for what has transpired, but we cannot see that as separate to her history with the DA. But as you know, and as you pointed out, at the center of this contention is a report that was conducted by BDO that came in the wake of that fire last year in Parliament, which has been put down to an electrical fault in the old Assembly building. But what the Public Works Department is pointing out today, that BDO report, which is almost 200 pages, I'm yet to get my mind around all of it at this point in time. But really what the Public Works Department is saying is that that report was by no means a fire assessment. It was a general risk assessment of the buildings in Parliament, determining where the shortcomings are in terms of safety, risk, protecting the heritage of the precinct, and that, in fact, of the 30 findings that BDO report made, only 3 of them related to fire safety aspects, and none of those 3 that they point out in that report were found to be in the buildings that were set ablaze on the 2nd of January. 3 incidents relate to, for example, an outdated fire extinguisher. One relates to a fire door. Those were all in a building that we colloquially on the Parliament precinct just refer to as 90 Plain Street, and that is where there are some committee rooms. There's a canteen. It's a massive building. It also houses many of the parliamentary staff. And so while the DA is wanting to use this report to show that Patricia de Lille did not fulfill her role as the Public Works Minister to ensure the safety of Parliament, what her department is saying today, that assessment was not to assess purely fire-related assessment, and so it cannot be used in this particular incident to point out that she failed or shirked in her duties in ensuring that Parliament was fireproof.
All right, Lindsay, let's leave you to it so you can get back to listening to those hearings. It's said to be fireworks, unfortunate use of that phrase on my part. But as far as, for instance, the report that came from the city of Cape Town, I do imagine that will come up. But of course, part of the conversation ends up being about continuity of the work of Parliament, the legislative work that Parliament has to carry out beyond the State of the Nation address.